Okay, so now we're recording. Welcome, everyone. I'm going to begin by making prostrations to Rinpoche. Okay. Let's try. So welcome, everyone, to the Chenrezig Tibetan Buddhist Center live Zoom of Rinpoche's teaching on Nagarjuna's precious Garland. Rinpoche is the retired abbot of His Holiness the Dalai Lama's monastery, and he holds the degree of Geshe Larampa, which is the highest degree one can achieve in the Tibetan Buddhist Gelug tradition. And Rinpoche is recognized by all the world's greatest scholars as one of the greatest living beings to understand the teachings of Buddha Shakyamuni. So anywhere in the world, it would be rare to have this opportunity to learn from a qualified teacher. A lot of people get on airplanes and travel to the Himalaya mountains or go to India to try to receive pure teachings. And when you get to those places, you find out that it's extremely rare and difficult to really connect with these qualified lamas and these very highly realized beings. So the opportunities are very rare no matter where you are. So here we have this opportunity here, and today it's in Madison, sometimes it's in Middletown. When COVID ends, it will be only there. So we have this opportunity, we don't have to travel for it. So what are we going to do to take advantage of it? And that's what we have to ask ourselves. Yes, it's very fancy that we are able to be surrounded by one of the most famous teachers in the world, who's done everything his entire life to not be famous, done everything his entire life to just be able to practice like a hermit while having over 500 teachings that are downloadable for free online. And we've watched this for a couple of decades occur, and now we have the opportunity to not only have these teachings that we can look back on and reflect on, but be able to, because we've connected for all of these years with such a qualified teacher, be able to receive some of the more individualized teachings. And we see that going on with some of the practices Rinpoche was talking about last week, of the Tara practice and the mantra garlands and things like that. So we're really able to connect in such a beautiful way now. And this opportunity is here and so rare. And I just want to say thank you, Rinpoche, and rejoice in all of the teachings that you've given over the years. Rinpoche speaks English, understands English very well. So most of the things that we say, he understands. He's just, his spoken, I understand it well because I understand Tibetan very well. But then when I go to speak it, it's like a broken car that's trying to run a little bit. So I understand that barrier. But today Rinpoche is teaching Nagarjuna's precious Garland, which is a text that was written to a king on how to be an ethical being while being a king, how to run the kingdom as an ethical being, and how to do so as an ethical being that's a Buddhist. And you see that there's large amounts of advice in the teaching on how to relate to other religious traditions and how to make sure that the other religious traditions are upheld as well. So the advice to the king isn't just turn everything into a Buddhist kingdom. It says, make sure that the Buddhist places are beautiful, but make sure that the non-Buddhist places are beautiful as well. So there's advice on daily living given in this text, and that's why it's so fortunate that Rinpoche has chosen to give us this teaching. So before the teachings begin, we'll start with some introductory prayers. I think we may be able to move this thing and make it better circumstance for the camera. So I'm going to do that. Because the sun's shining different than it was when we set it up. 네, 여기도 해. Yar. Okay, he said that's better. Okay. So before we get started, let's do the introductory prayers. Prayers before the teachings that we do now. So we'll begin with the mandala offering and then do the refuge prayer. The fundamental ground is scented with incense and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the 4 continents, the sun and the moon. I imagine this as a Buddha land and offer it. May all sentient beings enjoy this pure realm. Holy Lamas high, wrap the sky of your Dharma bodies in massive clouds of knowledge and love, and let them pour upon the earth of your disciples as we are ready, a shower of rain, the teachings deep and wide. I send forth this jeweled mandala to you, precious Guru. Edam Guru Rana Mandala Gamye Ratayami Yodan Joye Yonam La Yanjo Badu Daniel Yazuri Nagi Junye Jibezo Nam Ye Jola Benche Sanje Jubajo Sanje Jodan Joye Yonam La Yanjo Badu Daniel Yazuri Nagi Junye Jibezo Nam Ye Jola Benche Sanje Jubajo Yodan Jodi Yonam La Yanjo Badu Dani Jasu Jindagi Jinye Jipe Sonam Ye Rola Benche Sanye Jubar. Let's go. Okay, I think we're all set. Just Zoom went up 1 minute. I guess I got a bunch of texts. I felt it under my leg going off. I wanted to make sure it wasn't Ted saying it's not recording or something, that we did it wrong. So sorry about the break in continuum there.
다 매일 내 투아 걸리 커버레스. 걸리 커버레스 맞아 매일 내 자와셔도 맞아 투디오 하레스. 다 친데 나 회신 니 잡레스. 강강에서 가요 말레스. 다 조초와 저와 셔마 페이지게 돈다 루고레스. 저와 페이지 셔마 페이지 돈다 가 루고레스나 다 먹을 줄 보면 주진송아 계셔버레스. 네, 소주 뭐야? 마진발레 뭐야? 네. 주인 참아. 제도 나체 어디 먹을 줄도 뭐 비슷해 손바이나 되는 매일 되는 라일을 전투레스.
Bless you. So now, here we are. We have this human basis. This human basis is very rare and has so much opportunity. So it has the opportunity for us to practice the Dharma, and it has, in most texts, what it says, a pleasant mix of suffering and happiness that makes it possible for us to engage in the practices of the Dharma. But right now in our lives, the real meaning of what we can ascertain or what we can have is almost over, because a lot of us have already lived our lives or have already learned about what this world really has to offer. And we understand that what we do now will affect how we experience things later. And the things that we've experiencing now, the actions have already been engaged in that cause the results that we're experiencing. So the experiences that we're having now, and what really the things that we can have an effect on, the experiences that we're having now aren't things that we can have much of an effect on in terms of our actions, because they are manifestations or experiences that occur from our previous karma. So when we engage in our actions today, we need to look at what those will produce in our future. And if we like happiness and we wish to not suffer, then we have to engage in actions that will cause that to occur. So the Buddha stated that if we engage in the practices of going for refuge to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, and engage in ethical behavior that abandons the 10 non-virtuous activities. So the 10 non-virtuous activities are the 3 non-virtues of the body: killing, stealing, and sexual misconduct. The 4 non-virtues of the speech: lying, harsh words, divisive speech, and gossip. And 3 non-virtues of the mind: covetousness, harmful intent, and wrong view. So if we engage in the ethics that abandons those 10 non-virtuous activities and then acknowledge when we've engaged in negativity or acknowledged when we've wavered, the Buddha stated that we'd be able to have a higher realm rebirth. So in Buddhism, we state that there are 6 realms of cyclic existence. There are 3 lower realms and 3 higher realms. The lower realms are the hell, hungry ghost, and animal. The higher realms are the human, demigods, and gods. And the Buddha gave specific teachings that would allow a being to abandon those lower realms and only have the higher realm rebirth as a result of one's actions. So the Buddha stated that if you go for refuge to the 3 jewels of the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, engage in ethics that abandon the 10 non-virtuous activities and acknowledge those downfalls, that you would have a higher realm rebirth. So that's how we can begin to make use of this human basis that's so rare. We can use this opportunity to really work for things that it can produce, which are future experiences. Our actions now can only produce future experiences. The experiences that we're experiencing now are all a result of our previous karma. And the causes and conditions that are in our life are allowing for, that are causes and conditions that are in our continuum internally and external, and in our continuum internally, and then things externally are causing for these fruitions to happen, but they're caused by previous karma that we've accumulated since beginningless time. So what we can do with now is practice for our future. the jibuchung olaso.
ora
Kona. Nene.
단지 그다 집이 로주잖아.
So the next level of teachings that the Buddha stated were for beings who recognized that not only the lower realms of cyclic existence had problems, but the higher realms of cyclic existence were plagued with suffering. We here are sitting as human beings and can attest to the fact that we suffer, and that we suffer and we don't wish for that suffering to come on, and it comes on and it seems like it has no specific cause or rhyme or reason, but suddenly we're sick. Suddenly someone leaves us. Suddenly someone dies earlier than we think that they are going to. They have a short lifespan and we suffer immensely. Or someone steals our things that we cling to. All of these things can occur, and these are just in the human sufferings. And this is in the higher realms of cyclic existence. So all of the realms are plagued with at least this pervasive compounded suffering, which means that you're forced into a set of aggregates among the 5 aggregates over and over again beyond your control, without any independence. All beings in every realm, if they aren't liberated, have at least that. And the Buddha said, if you're a being that doesn't want any of that, then you engage in these practices. And those are called the teachings shared in common with beings of medium capacity. So the first category of teachings are the teachings that are shared in common with beings of small capacity. The Buddha, these category of teachings were the teachings just mentioned that lead to the higher realms. The next category of teachings are the teachings shared in common with beings of medium capacity. And those teachings are for beings who wish to get out of cyclic existence altogether and achieve their own nirvana or liberation. They engage in what is called the 3 highest higher trainings, the highest higher training in ethics, concentration, and wisdom. And in dependence upon those practices, they become enlightened. They achieve the enlightenment of the lesser vehicle, which is nirvana, an individual liberation, which is a abiding nirvana. So they get rid of the afflictive obstructions through practicing the 3 highest higher trainings, which cause them to be in cyclic existence, and then they're in nirvana. But they still have what's called the obstructions to omniscience, and they're not Buddhas yet. So the Buddha said, for people who want to take it the whole way and become Buddhas, who aren't satisfied with just an individual liberation, who recognize that the Buddha is the only one who can free all sentient beings, who really has the omniscience to help everyone thoroughly and completely in the best way. The type of being that's not satisfied with just having themselves out of cyclic existence and wants all beings out of cyclic existence has to follow what's called the Bodhisattva path, according to the Buddha. And that's what the Buddha did in order to achieve his position of Buddha. The Buddha was exactly like us, had the same afflictive obstructions and the obstructions to omniscience, was born again and again and again and suffered, and then figured out a way to not only no longer suffer ever again, but be able to be omniscient and help all beings in the most suitable way and the best way. So the Buddha stated that if you want to do that, then you practice what's called the great scope, the teachings for beings of great capacity. And those are generating this mind that aspires to enlightenment, the mind that wishes to become a Buddha day and night, and then practicing the 6 perfections of generosity, ethics, patience, effort, concentration, and wisdom. So these practices were summarized by a series of great masters over the centuries, and brought down into a really refined format that's very easy to understand, and it's very the codes are all kind of taken out, and the figurative and literal speech is kind of explained, and it's presented in a way that a being can become a Buddha. And those are those 3 categories that were just mentioned, because they all depend on one another. The Buddha needs, in order to become a Buddha in the great scope, you need the medium and small scope. In order to become a Hinayana foe destroyer in nirvana, you need the not only the medium scope, but the small scope. And in order to become liberated from the lower realms, you need the small scope. So all beings will become a Buddha. It's just a matter of what your affinity in that particular lifetime, what your karma allows you to be able to handle. And eventually you become more and more pure to the point where you can practice the highest teachings that there are. But if you don't do them in the stages of or the order, then because they're cause and effect relationship, they don't work. So that's why we have these teachings for beings of three capacities. We have the Lam Rim, so we can then take texts like the one we're reading today, Nagarjuna's Precious Garland, and we can interpret them and place them into the sections of the path where they need to go. So let's begin. I just saw where we were. Thank you, Lich, by the way. Every week, Lich reminds me of where we are, so I don't have to think, which is a wonderful thing for me, because that's all I do. It's a nice break. Okay, so we're on page 155 in the English, stanza 439. Jipja sumju sumjego. Jipja 400 and threes look like threes. Okay, 400 and what did I say? 39. 3, 5, 6. What did I say? 39. Thank you. 5, 36, 37, 38. Dum. The Jipja, Sunju, Rube. The Jipja. Okay. Just checking. My numbers could be a lot better. So my counting in Tibetan, I don't use it. I know. It's strange, but I don't use it. Datayan.
Dibandada Maleba, Chichar Paru, Shimayi, Ishisanji Macho Yu, Jidan Gombo, Nietu Joro, Cesare, Nietu, Sibale, Nietu Lana, J. Shiva, Dejin Tiba Chambula, Shaju Sambi Sajos, Cesare Nietu Tibala, Puna, Nietu Tibala, Nietu Sana. Nietu sa jeshi waris, but the Naji, Tiba Chambula, Sanju Simbi Sajo, Satombola, Sombane, Sajubi Batu Sajo, Sajo son waris, Tada Tombo, Ragawa, Satombo del Dene, Satombo Radugawa, Niba Jamame Bala Suba, Saju Saint Mason ware.
The Zhao Drapa, Becha.
Sanju Samba. Gashi Shir, Gashi Shir, Kundu Juan, Son Bon Shin, the Yin Shibi, Rich Shir, the number maybe now. Jimmy Paru Shinshun Joros, Jimba the Tashimba in a Jimmy Paru Shimba, Dores, Paru Shinshun Joro. Jiden Khan, Jayu Shin, Dalin Anju, Chamujoro, Niba Tama Magic Shah. Le dans Saint-Gilles, tu sais, Tama Mabisher, Magitada, la Nesher, T number Midamba, number Midamba, that late on the book in Najat Lady said, you go as about in the Buddha, you may go as about then the Buddha name was Twitter Paru. Shenshun Joro, but then the Chechina Dunjida, Japan, Kolo Jo and Joro, Sasun Bana, Yoshiba, Ishishi, Yunjun, Santan Mashi, Jebadan, Dosha Shedan, Yun Sesher, see number maybe now. Je vais pas Labaton. Hai Wanchen Kebate, je vais déjà Dubai, je vais déjà Dubai, j'ai pas eu trop. Le tiens c'est ça. Ça je veux te tiens son derrière.
That's it.
Et on a eu chez un jour, change shooting, malheur, Chebaton, Gondi, Gombi, Te nabara maybe na ratao tene haje juro tadeg lai jabu jugres. Yesu tawa roshwa kwene jonje kebate ngaba shinto janga du kunje shinto dugashir pabi densu trame ten shela keba jonje ti nabar mebe na gaden neje haje juros watene gwadi abu dubai na gaden lai jabul chenagres meti sheba thaje je nyamo tane do sheba tuba ngonshu shejate 사주고 사도가 뭐도 좋아. 사지 출라 뭐주시를 신내 라통 공부이 뭐가 도바 주시를 이 나버 메베나 사이자보 저 춘조로 어떤 거도 야부주바 이나 사이자보들 쳇다가 사이자보 드라마다 예퇴나지 뭐 줘봐 사비가제 현실이 depuis rento sont à des ça d'un barré de son les sont à des ça n'a rento sont des cher quand cher keji là tenen go ba so ba jo ti na ba me be na on jo lai da bu jo ro agwa tu ya bu ba ina wa de lai jabul che sont des ça pabi de ba mo tu xie xia ba shui ben chu chu qian bu zhong de jin jie ba zhen nu yi de jin zhen nu sa me you wa de mo tu xie me you de jin le dan ne nga sen shui yu de me chao san me chao ti na ba me be na 동기 다보 참반조로
Sa jepa noji yurbe.
사제발을 저마다다 세주 녀디 봉도로 녀디 봉도 사제발을 저마다다 사제녀 신주신 사제비가 녀디 봉도 그랬어
Sa jepa tambo noji pondwe.
사제부터 녀디 봉도 거기로 동기 참반조로 라존라제 수 라존라제 라사제 소지 준비 되된벨라 초이메 사고라네 레바이 로드시샤 제서이신 강아시 소소를 양다리 퇴비인들라 로드잠 티 나바 메베나 돈이 답이 천번조로 세제 삼바 제발에 라존 수지 초범에 교부 교바 취지 띵띵 사주 샤주 삼바 사지 외제 왕기 왕고시 디 나바 비베나 내장 하이 답은조로 사이 이시 유지 다 원수 전부 주인노 대대로 주부 대단네 샤주 선비 사주다 선지 나지 사전데 나바전도 자이바
Shishinanga de
어떻게
GK.
가자는 말이야
Dene, the Rinpoche, the Sa Dunba, Tama, Nuji Pacha Pondwe, Sa Dunba.
사준바 보지 말아. 사제바 리에디 본로.
So let me begin. From the simultaneous perfection of all of those seven is attained the sphere of inconceivable wisdom, the protectorship of the world. Just as the 8 grounds of the hearers, so Rinpoche said the hearer vehicle has 8 grounds, are described in the hearer vehicle, so that the 10 grounds of the Bodhisattva are described in the great vehicle. So we see in the notes that it says that Tsongkhapa quotes Chandrakirti's supplement, where they make extra. It says Chandrakirti. Sometimes I read these. Chandrakirti's explanation here of 11 grounds, the very joyful and so forth, is based on Nagarjuna's rough presentation of the 10 grounds of the 11th as Buddhahood. So it's showing that the Bodhisattva bath has 10 grounds. And why there is why you see the 11 grounds and what that's referring to, and why there's 10 here. And Tsongkhapa explains it by utilization of the supplement. So here now Nagarjuna is presenting 10 grounds. Here it says the first of those. So 10 grounds of Bodhisattva are described in the great vehicle. So it says, just as the hearer vehicle has grounds, there are 8 in the hearer vehicle. In the Bodhisattva vehicle, the Mahayana vehicle, the great vehicle, there are 10. And it says the first of these is the very joyful. So each of the grounds has a name. And that name sometimes corresponds with, some of the actual attainments that are occurring. The name always corresponds with what's occurring, but sometimes it's even more clear than others when you read it. So the first is the very joyful. So just as a translator's note, the Bodhisattva grounds occur at the stage of after one has the path of release, when seeing emptiness. Rinpoche, the Tonglan Le, the Sa Tambo Kabane. Then the Keiji Tonglan Keiji Tambo Sa Tambo. Okay, so the first moment of the path of seeing. See, this is what I wasn't clear. Is it during the uninterrupted breath or the path of release? So Rinpoche is saying that Tonglan Lena Keiji Tambo Sa Tambo Keiji. Okay, so the moment that you achieve the path of seeing, you achieve the first Bodhisattva ground. So the moment you achieve the path of seeing, you achieve the first Bodhisattva ground. And at that, so right when you become a Bodhisattva, it means that you've generated bodhicitta. So that's what qualifies you as a Bodhisattva. You've generated this desire to become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings that is dependent upon you generating the desire to want to get out yourself and understand suffering. This becomes the basis for the practices that then eventually become called the Bodhisattva's grounds. But it's not the moment one becomes a Bodhisattva that he or she is on those grounds. It's the moment that they see emptiness directly, the moment that they reach the path, Mahayana path of seeing. So there are 5 Mahayana paths: the Mahayana path of accumulation, the Mahayana path of preparation, the Mahayana path of seeing, the Mahayana path of meditation, and the Mahayana path of no more learning. One becomes a Bodhisattva when he or she achieves the Mahayana path of accumulation. He or she achieves the generation of bodhicitta. There's 3 levels to that. After the first level, it's argued that one cannot lose their bodhicitta, will not, fall to a lower practice, will always practice the Bodhisattva way. Then practices the path of preparation and analyzes and becomes very clear in a meditation way about emptiness and other things, and then sees it directly. Once they see it directly, they become a Bodhisattva on the first ground. So that's the person that we're talking about when we're explaining this. This is a being who's seen emptiness directly, is on the first ground, and the first ground is called the very joyful. So of course, you've seen emptiness directly. It's now you know the Four Noble Truths. You've experienced the Four Noble Truths. First of these is very joyful because of the bodhisattvas are rejoicing from having forsaken the three entwinements. So the three entwinements are viewing the mental and physical aggregates, which are the transitory collection, as a real self, afflicted doubt, and considering bad ethics and disciplines to be superior. And being born into the lineage of the ones gone thus. So they rejoice that they've forsaken this ignorance and this grasping, and then they are now born into the lineage of the Buddhas. It's saying the Tathagata lineage. Through the maturation of those good qualities, the perfection of giving becomes supreme. They vibrate 100 worlds and become great lords of Jambuvipa. So it's saying through practicing the perfections, we perfect them. So by engaging in generosity, by being generous, we eventually perfect generosity. By being more and more familiar with generosity, we then perfect it. And then we perfect our ethics, then we perfect our patience, then we perfect our effort, we perfect our concentration, we perfect our wisdom by gom, which is, we translate as meditation, but it would have been better to translate it as familiarization, because meditation just sounds like something out there and strange. The word only means familiarization, and then when you break it down, it says thinking about something again and again, again and again, again and again, and again and again. That's what gom is, meditation is. Something again and again. So that if you do giving again and again, you perfect it eventually. And that's what a Buddha has, the perfection of giving. Because the Buddha went on this bodhisattva path through these 10 grounds, became a bodhisattva, went through these 10 grounds, and then perfected all of those things and became omniscient. They vibrate 100 worlds and become great lords of Jambuvipa, the southern continent. That's, I believe, where we are. The second is Jambuvipa is the southern continent. Correct, Lozala? Thank you. The second is called stainless because all 10 virtuous actions of body, speech, and mind are stainless, and they naturally abide in those deeds of ethics. So before Rinpoche explained the ethics that abandons the 10 non-virtuous activities, it's saying this bodhisattva is pure in regards to the abandonment of those 10. This bodhisattva abandons killing, stealing, and sexual misconduct, abandons lying, harsh words, divisive speech and gossip, and abandons covetousness, harmful intent, and wrong views, purely on this second ground. Through the maturization of those good qualities, the perfection of ethics becomes supreme. They become universal monarchs, helping beings, masters of the glorious 4 continents and the 7 precious objects. So they become world monarchs because of this karma, because of the ethics that they hold. The third ground is called the luminous because the pacifying light of wisdom arises. The concentrations and clairvoyances are generated, and desire and hatred are completely extinguished. Through the maturation of those good qualities, they practice supremely the deeds of patience and become a great wise monarch of the gods. They put an end to desire. So patience and the perfection of patience, there's a connection there. And it says on this third ground, through these practices, the maturation of these practices of practicing these 6 perfections and generosity and the purifying the 10 non-virtues, and then engaging in the concentrations and clairvoyances and purifying this patience, then we have this extinguish. Somehow all of this leads up to being able to extinguish desire and hatred. Through the maturization of those good qualities, they practice supremely the deeds of patience and become a great wise monarchs of the gods. They put an end to desire. The fourth ground, the radiant, because the light of true wisdom arises. They cultivate supremely all the harmonies with enlightenment. Through the maturization of those good qualities, they become monarchs of the gods without combat. They are skilled in quelling the arising of the view that the transitory collection is inherently existent in mind. The fifth is called the extremely difficult to overcome because all ill deeds find it extremely hard to conquer them. Because all evil ones find it extremely hard to conquer them. They become skilled in knowing the subtle meanings of the noble truths and so forth. Through the maturization of those good qualities, they become monarchs of the gods abiding in the joyous land. So they become monarchs of the god of Ganden, it's Rinpoche said. So monarchs of Ganden at that point. at the fifth ground. They overcome the foundations of all foreigners, afflictive emotions and views. The sixth is called the approaching because they are approaching the good qualities of a Buddha. Through familiarity with calm abiding and special insight, they attain cessation and hence are advanced in wisdom. Through the maturization of those good qualities, they become monarchs of the gods in the land of the liking emanation. Hearers cannot surpass them. They pacify those with the pride of superiority. And the seventh is the gone afar, because the number of good qualities has increased. So this bodhisattva is becoming more and more pure by the moment. Moment by moment, more negativity is ceasing. And through the maturization of those good qualities, they become masters of the gods in the land of the controls over others' emanations. They become great leaders of teachers who know direct realizations of the Four Noble Truths. And now they reach the eighth ground. At this point, that bodhisattva has removed the afflictive obstructions. So they are at the same level as a hearer who is in nirvana. And they're not done, but so you can see how there's still more things that have to be done in order to achieve that omniscience the Buddha has, and how the hearer would need to do it too, because they haven't engaged in certain practices of accumulation and purification that are necessary. So the eighth is the immovable, the youthful ground. Immovable, one is now no longer has afflictive obstructions. Through non-conceptuality, they are immovable, and the spheres of activity of their body, speech, and mind are inconceivable. Through the maturization of good qualities, they become a Brahma, master of 1,000 worlds, foe destroyers, solitaries, and realizers, and so forth, cannot surpass them in positing the meaning of the doctrines, because they are Mahayanas. They now have the same level as a being in nirvana, but they're a Mahayanist. So they know the rest of the path too, and they've been practicing it all the way up to that eighth ground. So they've accumulated so much more of the collection of wisdom and merit that's necessary for that, as Chandrakirti says, for the golden goose to fly over the ocean of suffering, it's necessary to have both wings of method and wisdom for that bird to be able to fly and be free to get to the other side. And likewise, it's necessary to have all of these collections of method and wisdom for this bodhisattva to achieve Buddhahood. And the hearer has not collected those things. So therefore, at this ground, no matter where the Hinayanist is, the Mahayanist is superior in understanding. That's what it says. Through the maturization of those good qualities, they become a Brahma, master of 1,000 worlds, full destroyers, solitary realizers, and so forth, cannot surpass them in positing the meaning of the doctrines. The ninth ground is called excellent intelligence. Like a regent, they have attained correct individual realization and therefore have good intelligence. Through the maturization of those good qualities. So these are the grounds that are now removing the smallest of the great of the small, the medium of the small of the small imprints of the afflictions that are left over, that are making a person not a Buddha at that point, making the person not omniscient at that point. Right now, during these grounds of the 8th, 9th, and then 10th is freedom, they're purifying this stuff that's imprints of what's left over. They're purifying what the Hinayana still has. So the 9th ground is called excellent intelligence. Like a regent, they have attained correct individual realization and therefore have good intelligence. So the maturization of those good qualities, they become a Brahma, master of 1,000,000 worlds, foe destroyers, and so forth, cannot surpass them in responding to questions and the thoughts of sentient beings. So now we see the story of the monk before. The loju detsigu yapudu gangin sene the sa gupa the da jomba the nushe the sa gupa yakshu. Then the lama, the Shariputra, the loju the drapache pentogamare the loju yapudu. So before we see the story where this is actually manifests in the Buddha's previous stories, where there was an older gentleman who was maybe 80, I think, in the story, who wanted to become ordained as a monk and went to Shariputra. Shariputra said, "You're too old. It won't be of benefit. I don't see anything in your continuum that makes this make any sense to me." So he became very distraught because he wanted to become enlightened and went to go kill himself. He thought, if I can't become ordained, there's nothing left for me in this life. Why don't I just pray at the moment of killing myself somehow to become a human, and then I can become a monk or a nun then. If I can't do it in this life, all I want to do is that in this life, so I'm going to commit suicide. So he goes down to the river to drown himself, and the Buddha has omniscience. So the Buddha, has omniscience, and this being is connected to the Buddha because obviously wants to become ordained, so his faith in the Buddha. So the Buddha's connected to this being, and through omniscience shows up right at the river, emanates right to the river and says, what's going on? What are you doing? And he says, well, Shariputra, your root disciple, told me I can't become a monk and I'm depressed and that's all I want to do, so I'm going to kill myself. And the Buddha snapped his fingers and said, Shariputra is a Hinayanist and does not have the omniscience that I do. Even though he's my student, he hasn't practiced the paths that are necessary to see what I can see. And I can see that in a previous life, very, 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 very far back, you were chased a pig around a stupa when you were a dog. And when you were doing it, you thought how wonderful it was that you were circumambulating this stupa. And somehow you thought about something that created this karma that's making you a suitable basis to be ordained and forcing you into this like desire to be ordained. He said that I'll ordain you myself. And then that being becomes a foe destroyer. The Sanje, the Kon de Ron Segore. Yeah, he became a foe destroyer of the Mahayana, which then, if you look at realization-wise, the being who told them they were not able to do what they were saying, actually, at the end of the story, not in all Dharma realities, but the end of this story, ends up with the lesser realization than the person who went ahead with the Buddha's advice. So just wanted that story because it says the ninth ground is excellent intelligence. Like a regent, they have attained correct individual realization and therefore have good intelligence. Through the maturization of those good qualities, they become a Brahma, a master of a million worlds. Foe destroyers and so forth cannot surpass them in responding to questions in the thoughts of sentient beings. So you see that question in the thought of the sentient being, the elderly gentleman who wanted to be ordained. Shariputra couldn't respond properly because he didn't have the realization. The 10th is the cloud of doctrine because the rain of holy doctrine falls. The Bodhisattva is bestowed empowerment with light rays by the Buddhas. Through the maturization of those good qualities, they become master of the gods of pure abode. They are supreme great lords, master of the sphere of infinite wisdom. Thus, those 10 grounds are renowned as the 10 Bodhisattva grounds. The ground of Buddhahood is different, being in all ways inconceivable. So why was that footnote there? Because of this last stanza, the ground of Buddhahood is different. Why is Nagarjuna saying that? Because somewhere else he says 11 grounds. So now he explains why. Those are the 10 active grounds. The 11th ground is the result. Okay, so we'll end there. And now we'll have time for question and answer. We do have a board meeting directly after this. So what I'm going to do is bring Rinpoche in because it's hot. We'll assemble for the board meeting. We'll set up a computer or however, if everybody wants to use their phone, whatever we're going to do. But we do have to, at the end of class, make sure that we respect that time. So question and answer. Why don't I go to the Zoom first? Chiwadan Lenja.
And then Lujo Bedi with the Golomba Necheta, Momulu to Chongores, Satambo, Rotoga Drune, Tanda Gabayas and the Wajan Rivers.
Sanjay Sombre.
No, Sanji.
Okay, hold on one moment. Just bear with me. So we see that Nagarjuna, the textbook writer of the Precious Garland, was prophesized by the Lord Buddha. We find Manjushri asks who, after the teacher has passed. So Manjushri asks the Buddha, so who, after the teaching has passed, will uphold the vehicle pacifying the elaborations of terms and conceptuality, the object of the exalted wisdom in individual knowledge and meditative equipoise? Who will uphold, ultimately, the ultimate view of the middle way consequence school, the highest view of the Buddha? Who will uphold the final view of the Buddha after you pass? Because it's so subtle, and the information we have is going to mix people up. It's not going to be clear. I'm feeling like it's going to leave. So who's going to uphold it? Manjushri asks the Buddha. Manjushri, who we consider the Buddha of wisdom in Tantra, and then in this context is a bodhisattva, a student of Buddha, says, who's going to uphold it? And then know that after the one gone to bliss has passed away, there will appear after the passage of time one who will uphold the ways of emptiness, the essence of the teaching. In the south, in the area of Vidarbha, will be a monk known widely as Shriman, who will also be called Naga. Destroying the extremes and positions of inherent existence and conventional non-existence, he will thoroughly teach in the world the unsurpassed great vehicle, my vehicle. Having done this, he will achieve the very joyful ground. So it's saying, by doing so, he will achieve the first bodhisattva ground and then go to the blissful pure land upon passing away. So Nagarjuna was prophesied by the Buddha to be a clarifier, an upholder, a trailblazer who would put a light on the path of the Madhyamika Prasangika, on the view of the Madhyamika Prasangika. So now we can have questions, Rinpoche said. Okay. Is it accurate to say that life in this very world itself is not suffering, but life conditioned by ignorance and negative karma is suffering, and life is this very world that is not conditioned by ignorance and karma is bliss? I would say it's neutral, but let me get on that. I wish I could read it again and again as I'm translating this. That life in this very world is not suffering. Our life is suffering, full stop. So our life is this world. It's our cyclic existence, our individual experience of it. So I'm just wondering, is the question, I wish I could go back and forth. Like you can answer it live. Oh, I see, I'm doing that. Are you looking, put another thing up. I'm gonna go and start translating this. If you're looking to know if the world itself that's abiding is contaminated by itself, or are the sentient beings needing to be there to make that contaminated? I'm just not sure what the question exactly is. Is it accurate to say that life in this very world itself is not suffering, but life conditioned by ignorance and negative karma is suffering? And life is the very world that not conditioned by ignorance and karma is bliss. So if you don't have ignorance and karma, you have life. You have karma no matter what. Okay. Then ngatsu the dungyao yure. Then ngatsu ngo. Ngatsu the sacha the sacha kanga dungyao demba yimba. Yin. Then ngatsu mena sacha dungyao demba yimba.
So
the place of birth, the place and its inhabitants, the Yanjasuranam, are the truth of suffering. The place and its inhabitants are the truth of suffering, the Yanjasuranam.
So
the place and its inhabitants are the truth of suffering. Sentient beings and the place that they inhabit are the truth of suffering. So I'm very blessed to have Losonla here nowadays. I am very blessed because he's much more adept in Tibetan scripture than I am as a result of studying for so long in the golden cauldron called South India. So just let me just finish. So the place and its inhabitants are the truth of suffering. So if there is a sentient being, there is this experience of the place, right? So there's an experience of a place. So that being and that place are the truth of suffering according to scripture. Then sentient mena the sacha yu sentient mena. Then the sentient gi le mena sacha yurbe.
사자유도요.
So if but then sacha de sache samein.
실제 그가 매우 자손의 배치 3회 찬우고요, 진짜.
So interesting. So if there are no sentient beings, the place could be considered not contaminated. So I was asking, in terms of contaminated and not contaminated. So the place would be considered not contaminated if there were no sentient beings experiencing it. But there's a lot of debate about this, Rinpoche is saying. He's saying it's not something that's we're just stating. There's a lot of debate about this. So then Senchen, the Senchen mepa chana, konso sanje kanga yure, the Senchen mena, then New Balanchu, John Dramenyen, the Lo Zambaling, Yurbe, Yuna mena. Okay, so I asked him if there's no longer sentient beings, and everyone's a Buddha, if there are still 4 continents, the northern, southern, eastern, and western continent. And he said yes. So I don't know if that helps. So we contaminate it. If it's any, basically it's an afflicted mind's experience of it that contaminates it. Would that be a good way to say it? Yeah, it's an afflicted mind's experience of those 4 continents that make them impure. Hope that helped. That really helped me. Yes, Alessandra.
So, kind of a piggyback off of that question, does Buddhism define life to be this but not that? Is there a specific definition of what life is and is not, according to Buddhism?
The definition of life?
Yes.
Say it's any good. Say it's any. Say. Say did, say ngama, say shema, say any rube.
진짜 치셔마. 세가 자마로.
The da say sena. Sit sena da yuna mena say yuna mena.
maybe tsiddla.
So say means that if there is a span of life, a being with a span of life, they have a life. You know what I mean? If there's someone with, so it's the span. The life is the span. That's the considered life in what he's saying. So life is say, the span. So if you have a span, you know what I mean? Like whether it's a moment or if it's 100 years, that is the life. That's what qualifies it as a life. It's just the thing you're experiencing. That's life. That's your life.
But life has to be experienced. So does a car, if it is built in 1960, and then it is no longer a car in 1990, does it have life? Is it life? Or do we...
Life has to be sentient.
Has to be sentient. But then how could there be no...
The Rinpoche, Shin say, Yurube.
시제 연관론도 되면 신이 전이에서 들어가거든 다 이놈만 하고 말이지.
So in the definition, I asked him, I just cut to the chase. I said this because I said something and then I thought of a consequence, because that's what happens when you study debate for 8 seconds. It pollutes your mind. It makes you question everything you think. So I asked him, well, wait a second, does life, he said the span of something. Now I said, does a tree have life? And then when he said the definition of tree, the tree, the sheen, say.
신이나 연관론도 되면 쳐서나 신감을 주시라고 그러. 신감을 신으로. 그래 연관론도요 말로. 어떤 연관론도 되면 신이 전이서 쳐봐요 말이지.
Can you translate that real quick for me?
It just means something that has branches and leaves. That's the definition.
Yeah, that's what. Shingitseni.
Wait, the confusion might be a little bit here in that the term used that we're using now, that can sometimes be like a lifespan, but sometimes it could just be
Measurement.
as a measure of something.
Yes.
The way that you identify something sort of based on its defining characteristic.
Thank you.
So So you want to say socha.
Okay.
Socha means like a living life. Like a living,
Being alive.
being alive. That's what
Thank you.
it's-
Sokcha. Seni irbe. Sokcha. Sokcha. They kongi se kongi chua. Say the sikyakshu yomar. Sokcha.
소자가 전에서 그전 도마송스.
He says, I haven't, not that I've seen in a text. If using this other word, is there the sokcha dan se sokten?
수단 덴바. 수단 덴바는 소자 지바로.
He said it's the same as socha. The mota sotan demba. Yimba ma yimba.
뭐다?
Mota.
수단 덴바 있으지 말이야.
So no, a car doesn't have a life. See, this is right here. Like that little bit is so nice to clarify.
수단 덴바이면 든 매여베실은 절로다.
Right, he said if it has this, then you're saying the car is human? Is Soktan Demba the Miambi Chop? No. I see. Okay. Okay. So he was just maybe using that, and then he probably would have gone, is it a this, is it a that, is it a this, is it a that, and then just found out that it doesn't fall into a category of that which is a living being. It's not a being that's imputed among the 5 aggregates. You know what I mean? Because that's what I think is going to have to be in order to have the life that you're speaking of.
Thank you.
But something can change. So if you have a car that breaks and it falls apart and it's all taken apart, it's no longer suitable to be called a car because it doesn't perform the function of driving. It doesn't have it's not suitable to be shown as car anymore. It doesn't have the mota surua. When you can't figure out the definition, you just saw surua on there. Suitable to be shown. I love having someone here who's in on the joke. Yes, Don. So car doesn't have life because it's not a sentient being. A sentient being, just because you have life, doesn't mean though you are a sentient being, because the Buddha is not a sentient being and has life, right? Okay, so anyway, that's what you start to do when you get this information. You start to analyze it in that way, and then you figure out whether you know what you just learned or not. And I usually find out that not so well. Once I start to analyze the information that I thought I understood so well, it falls apart very quickly. And then I think that I need to start back to like the first thing. Regularly, Lori sees me do it all the time. Like, I'm just stopping this. I'm going back to, Guru devotion, and I'm going to learn about medicine only and figure out how to help him. And that's my practice the rest of my life. Yes, Don. Oh, go ahead.
The Buddha nature.
Yes.
We all have the Buddha nature.
Yes.
And the Buddha nature is always here. It has always been here. It will always be here. It's never
Correct.
going to go away. So the Buddha nature, in a sense, doesn't die.
No.
Can't die. So in that sense, we're not going to die. If we have the Buddha nature, we're not going to die.
But the
So
we part.
then the question is, what dies?
So, but the we part, when you say we, I just want to ask the question, do you mean Don? Or do you mean the continuum that you're willing to say in the last life might have been an ant? You're talking about Don right now, or a continuum that could have, in like 100 years ago, been an ant that doesn't know Don and that thinks they're an ant?
Okay. So the we,
Yes.
if to define what the we is,
Yes, please.
well, that would be all sentient beings.
Okay, so this we, so I see, that's why it was important for me. So you're saying collectively we,
Yeah.
because we have Buddha nature that will always be,
We always be here.
we will always have Buddha nature, but
So
we will always be here. If you're using the Buddha nature, if you're saying that the we is our, and you're saying that it's our Buddha nature, if you're collectively, will always be here. Yes, we can say that. It won't die, but we die. Okay,
there's a second question.
Okay, let me get to the first one.
What dies?
Yes.
What is reborn?
Okay. Rinpoche, they country what you're there.
상제세.
Yeah, not to Sanjay. That's good. That's
상제세 진짜 그날 요레스.
less so.
쇼스나 안 진짜 그날 이지 세번 도왔어. 그 제주지에 생각들었어. 상제는도 이시 초고자는 그래서 새 대만 마루와데 라지 내리려고 그랬어. 상제는도 원이 고자는
So the Buddha nature that we have, the Buddha potential, is something that we all possess. So if you say, posit that which is Buddha potential, what is this thing that we say we all have? Rinpoche would say that the Yanjasurana.
진짜 그걸 이지 세번
Less.
어때 제주지에
Genju.
그 대만 마루와데 라지 내리.
Okay. So all sentient beings have mental consciousness. So if we ask, show the sign, prove and posit that which is this Buddha nature, we would say that all sentient beings have what is, it's translated a lot of different ways, but this, it's like something that's can development, a developing Buddha nature. This developable. What's the best one that you've heard, right? Evolving. It's something that's that allows for the Buddhahood to occur. So what's this evolving Buddha nature, or this developing? It's the mental consciousness. So all sentient beings have a mental consciousness. So because you have mental consciousness, you have Buddha nature. Because mental consciousness itself has the ability to be purified because it's impermanent. It's not static as having non-virtue or virtue. It's right now, if we are not Buddhas or if we don't have, these realizations, it's a mix of virtue and non-virtue that turns into experience. But virtue and non-virtue are impermanent. So those things can be extinguished. So if you extinguish all of the non-virtue, then you only have virtue, and you're moving towards what is a Buddha. So that's that potential that we all have, that development, that evolving Buddha nature is that fact that we have a mental consciousness. Just the fact that we have a mental consciousness means that we have a chance, because our mental consciousness isn't static. And, our mind is that which is clear and knowing. So what goes in it is but the nature of the mind itself is clarity. It's just clarity. It's not this or that. It's what we put there. And that's why we familiarize ourselves more and more with good. We're putting more good. Eventually there's no bad, it's only good. And eventually we can only experience what good lets us experience. So the fact that we have that thing that can be purified and cleansed and changed and evolve and develop is a sign that we have Buddha nature. It doesn't mean we have this special power. It doesn't mean that we have some Buddha living in us. It just means that we have the same potential because we have a mental consciousness that Buddha had. Because Buddha had a mental consciousness. And the Buddha's mental consciousness had the same ingredients as our mental consciousness in terms of potential. So it's just saying we have the same potential the Buddha did before he or she was a Buddha. So that's the first sign. That's the first qualifier and sign and presentation of what the Buddha nature is. The second, hold on, I don't want to forget this. The second is called the natural, the Rangjin, the natural Buddha nature. And that's the fact that the mental consciousness itself that can develop because it's not truly established, because it's empty. It isn't this or that. It doesn't have any true nature of this or that. So it can be whatever you familiarize yourself with more, if you will. You familiarize your continuum more. So Rinpoche first wanted to explain what Buddha nature was. Buddha nature is first this developing Buddha nature, which is the fact that we have a mental consciousness. So we have a shot. We have a shot because we have the thing the Buddha had. That's the main ingredient for becoming a Buddha. It's the only thing that you have to change completely and turn around in order to become a Buddha. We have that. And the second is that that thing that we have isn't truly established. It's empty, so it can change. So that is how we posit, first of all, Buddha nature. Then ngatsu jewa ngama dan jewa shema rinpoche. Jewa ngama dan, he's counting, by the way. You thought I wrote that as a joke. You see he's counting, I guarantee it. Jutrangaja.
Oh.
Rinpoche. Then ngarichua. Then ngatsu jewa shema dan jewa ngama. The gari drogudu.
What the Joe Hama the Shema to share case of his. Joe Hama, you said that, and then I said, Julie Sheba to us. Sheba the Sheba Hama Jumare, Padu Sheba the Jumare, Padu Sheba the Hama Jumare, Joe Toma members.
Lesser.
Mega trade Toma members. Then I did this.
So we should talk and establish past and future lives and understand that. Excuse me, I asked him what dies, what went from the past life to this life to the future life. Basically, what is that? So he said, well, let's establish past and future lives. So what goes from life to lifetime? What is it what's happening? Right now we have consciousness. We have a consciousness that we're sitting in. This moment's consciousness was caused by a previous moment's consciousness. Right? So the moment before is what caused this moment. Caused by a previous moment's consciousness, previous moment's consciousness. You start to bring that back, you'll get to birth, right? You figure out, okay, so then where was I then? So then you go into the womb. According to Buddhism, consciousness enters the womb at conception. So that consciousness of that life that was just born was caused by the consciousness in the womb, which was caused by, you get to the very moment of conception. Where did that consciousness come from, according to Buddhism? It came from the intermediate state, the previous moment, which was in the intermediate state, the bardo. And then you trace the bardo back. Where was the first moment of the bardo from? The first moment of the bardo was from the last moment of the life of that previous life. So that is how we state that there are beginningless this moment could not be caused by a previous concordant cause. All results are concordant with their causes. Non-consciousness can never cause consciousness. So you can't logically posit first consciousness unless you want to assert a creator being. And if you assert a creator being, you have to have the same contents in your consciousness that they do if they made you. If their consciousness is yours and they made your first moment of consciousness, then you have their consciousness and you have God's consciousness. And we can all ask ourselves that question: do we think we made everything? If that's the root and that's the correct view. So that's how you start to negate how there might not be previous lives. So you can't come up with a seed or a strand that makes any sense other than a previous moment caused this moment. And then you arrive at every time beginningless consciousness, and then you when you start to analyze it forward, you recognize that it's endless as well. It just changes. It goes from contaminated to pure if you become a Buddha, but it's the same continuum. It's just can be filled with what you fill it with. That's it. So what dies? You are right now, I am Jeff. I have the karma at this very moment to still be Jeff. In 5 minutes, I may not, I may die of a heart attack. I may live another 100 years because science has some incredible breakthrough. All of that will be because of whatever karma I created in a previous life. That is my completing karma. My propelling karma is what threw me into this life, made me a human, and my completing karma is filling in all the details, Penjigile and Zujigile. So my completing karma and filling in the details. So whatever completing karma I have will dictate my lifespan and so forth. And once that's over, Jeff is finished. But the consciousness that Jeff's hanging out with or in and experiencing Jeff from will continue. But it no longer has the Jeff ingredients. The Jeff ingredients lost their potential to create Jeff, and Jeff dies. So it's what what causes death is the karma doesn't have the potential to create life anymore. You shoot an arrow in the sky, eventually it doesn't have the power to go up. Eventually, the karma doesn't have the power to keep us as a human and we die. And sometimes we have karma to keep us as a human for 100 years. Sometimes we have the karma to keep us as a human for a moment in the womb. And we don't even know. I don't know what, oh, my cell phone. I'm good right this second. I have something, but thank you so much, Coleman. So that's the explanation of past and future lives, how that occurs, and Buddha nature, and the two kinds of it and what it is. So let me just, do you have a question off of that?
No.
Cool. Because Dan, I think we have a, hold on one sec. Is sentence suspended by anesthesia or coma? What? I don't know what that means. To clarify, is one still a sentient being while under anesthesia or in a coma? Yes. I'm not going to ask. Rinpoche, the Chiran me sana the ni shipo care operation ja sansan atsu gutso umare Chiran sentient yin mayan. Yeah, it's a sentient. Yes, a sentient being. You are a sentient being until you cross the 10th bodhisattva ground. The sentient sasan sajupa. Okay.
There was one little question, but it isn't. It's animals. You mentioned mental consciousness.
Yes.
Do animals don't have mental consciousness?
Yes, they do.
So then animals
Have Buddha nature.
have Buddha nature.
Yes. They just can't do as much with it as we can because they're ignorant. They're chasing after food, shelter, and worried about being eaten by a larger animal, according to Buddha, at all times. They're just looking for food and they're scared they're going to be eaten. It's kind of true if you think about it. When the dog barks every 5 seconds, it's because they're afraid they're going to be eaten. Protection too, but because they're afraid we're going to be eaten. Who's next? Anyone? Yes, Melinda.
Regarding the question near the beginning of the question session,
Yes.
so it was my understanding that everything that's around us, including our body and our environment, was somehow created by our own karma.
Yes.
We live in, the political period we live in now because of our own karma.
Yes.
This beautiful yard because of our own karma. So I don't understand how the things could still be here without sentient beings. What are the things that we made? Because so much of this is created by karma.
Our experience of it is what's created. It sounds like today. Rinpoche, ngatsu ngo, hanga ngatsu le, marbe, ngatsu the guardian da, the yapudu, the yitu wo, the kanga da ngatsu le shiwo.
ngatsu chulo yeshu ba tsuke la yesu ba se duas.
Less.
Hindu da. Ngatsu namba che na le la tene no des.
The Triwa Tambo, the Senchen Mena, New Banlan Chu, John Driminyan, you me, then Chan you last one. The Yene Sanjay Sumpere, the Dusun, Garzusun, then called the Samzusun.
Consum the
Consumba, Dusun Yomar, Consum.
Consum sense over this.
Less so. The Gyawa Yomare Gangisina Consumba Senzubere. The Yene Senche Mena Sen you. I see. Sanjay dan. Okay, here we go. Hold on. Sanjay dan Senchen Mena Zambalin Yurube. Okay. That's the trick. Okay, so if there are no sentient beings, Buddha said, Rinpoche said that there's still the continents. There's Buddhas. So if there's a mind, what created the three realms of existence? A mind. They're still minds. They're just Buddhas. Are experiencing the worlds. They're experiencing them as pure. So that's why the worlds themselves are pure, and they don't have, they're like the mind, almost like selves. They're clear. The worlds itself are clear. Our experiences of them are what makes it what they are. So the way we can say that they're clear is because the Buddhas can have an uncontaminated experience of the world and it's still there. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So it's not saying, so if you're saying, oh, there's no sentient beings, then how can a world be created? The Buddha's minds create the worlds. They're just not contaminated anymore. Yeah, I didn't know. I didn't get that either. Thank you for that. I didn't get to there it wasn't like racking my mind, but I hadn't thought about it. So I like when I think about something new. That's a Rik Sarpa. I like that. Thank you. Tu chena, this shit is selbudu.
Yeah.
The senchen mena, the new balanchu kandre. This Sanje is Sam Zubure. It becomes the pure land of a Buddha. Everything becomes the pure land of a Buddha. But there's a lot of debate about this, he said. Rinpoche is feeling very well. Okay, so let's do the concluding prayers, mandala offering, dedication. We'll get Rinpoche inside. We need to do the board meeting and so forth. And I just want to say thank you for continuing to allow me to translate all of these years. You know, it's at the beginning of it, there was no one else to do it, but I'm so glad now there wasn't now. And that I've had this opportunity to evolve as a translator and learn right alongside all of you. Because before we were in the first 10 years of my translating, Rinpoche we didn't have like the Lam Rimchemo text. Rinpoche would just teach, and he wouldn't prepare class with me. He refused to. So I was like on this shotgun teaching thing for so many years. And that's really where I learned to speak Rinpoche, because I just never knew what was coming. So I've evolved right along with all of the students, because I didn't know what to study. I was learning it right firsthand with everyone else. So I just want everyone to know that I'm so grateful for all of you to have given me that opportunity, that I've then been able to give to you all. That it started with my benefit, and don't get that wrong ever. Please don't ever think that misses my mind for one moment of my breath. So let's do the concluding prayer. Rinpoche, I pray for you to stay another 100 years. Nagarjuna made it 900 years somehow in the story, so maybe some magic can happen. And there'll be some twist in modern technology, and Rinpoche can teach us, I don't know. But then we have to live long. It's just a big mess. We've got today. That's all we know we have. Okay. Concluding mandala offering and dedication prayer. Tuchen Rinpoche. The fundamental ground is scented with incense and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the four continents, the sun and the moon. I imagine this as a Buddha land and offer it. May all sentient beings enjoy this pure land. I dedicate whatever virtues I have collected for the benefit of the teachings and of all sentient beings, in particular for the essential teachings of Venerable Losang Drapa to shine forever. I send forth this jeweled mandala to you, precious Guru. I dedicate all this virtue to emulate the knowledge of the hero Manjushri and likewise Samantabhadra as well. With whatever dedication is praised as supreme by all the conquerors who traverse the three times, I also dedicate all my roots of virtue for the sake of auspicious deeds. In the heavenly realm of Tibet, surrounded by a chain of snow mountains, the source of all happiness and health for beings is Tenzin Gyatso, Chenrezig in person. May his life be secure for hundreds of kalpas. I pray for the long life of the precious Khensur Wandak, upholder of scriptural and realizational doctrines, the spiritual friend who trained extensively in the 5 great philosophical texts with exceptional wisdom and perseverance. Tuji Rinpoche, Gutsi Shapi Denrona. And may all of Rinpoche's doctors live long lives as well. We're so blessed to have the Venerable Punso Wamo come the other day, Friday, to check Rinpoche. She was the Venerable Namkhai Norbu Rinpoche's root doctor and traveling doctor, Tibetan medicine. Very, very esteemed scholar, just a great practitioner, and just has the greatest amount of love you'll ever see for Rinpoche. And she came here, and I've never seen anyone happier. She was so happy to see his health because she's checked him for so many years. And he's given him a routine of Tibetan medicine that she's very aware of dialysis. I mean, actually helped a dialysis patient get off of the machine and go from like 10 to 15% to 60 and 30 through pomegranate. So the dietitians are all aware of the supplementation, so there's nothing strange happening. But I just want everyone to know that from a Western perspective, Rinpoche's health is incredible at his age. And from an Eastern perspective, he was just checked by one of the greatest doctors alive right now. May we pray for her long life. And she's very happy with his progress and said, quote unquote, Rinpoche at this stage in his life needs 24-hour care, and he needs to be surrounded by people who love him, and that only. So that was the prescription, and she worries about his depression. Just as a practitioner, we never talk about people as human beings, but let's do that. So we just have to make sure that we make everything around Rinpoche's life whatever would be the most conducive to practice. And anything that we need to take care of around that for him, let's just do as a group and not make him have to think about those things. So I'm just going by the advice of the doctor. You know, she prescribed only a few things, and one of the prescriptions was make sure he's not surrounded by anything but love. So thank you, and thank you to all you who love him. There is not a monopoly on that. Rinpoche has been speaking regularly with Tibet a few times a week. I got a plan on my phone, so you can call anytime he wants. No problemo. So he calls Tibet. The other morning, we were out at the boat launch in Madison. It was so wild. We're at the boat launch in Madison, and we call, and all of a sudden we hear, whoosh, ding, whoosh, ding. And I'm like, Rinpoche, what's going on in the background? He's like, he's talking to me on the phone while he milks the cows, of course. And then I said, do you have the internet so I can send a picture? And they said, what is an internet? So we were in like this line into a village in eastern Tibet in Kham, been talking with his family. And we called Geshe Aga. Geshe Aga is now the chanting master for Drepung. Yeah, and Rinpoche thinks that when Geshe Aga, I'm going to put some pressure on, when Geshe Aga came from Tibet, and he came, when they first come to Dharamsala, or where, the Geshe Aga Pula Peson, Tambo, Dharamsala La Peson, Geshe Aga. Then Jao Rinpoche got Kaba Tonsum. So Aga came to Dojiden, Bodhgaya, right? Dojiden, Varanasi, I get the two. Bodhgaya, to see the new arrivals. And Geshe Aga was amongst a whole large amount of youth, young kids. They were all new arrivals. And he went and blessed all of the children. He stopped at Aga, and Rinpoche was there. He didn't just tell me to tell this, but I'm doing it. So Rinpoche was there, and he stops at Geshe Aga, and everyone thinks, oh, he's going to recognize him as a Tulku. What's going on? And he sat there for a long period of time looking at him and moved on. And Rinpoche is prophesizing. There's someone called Umzer Tembo from Drepung, who is one of the most famous Umzers of all time. From Lo Seleng, Tupten Kongmingarde. The Umzer Tembo, Ngama, the Keja Tembo, the Umzer Tembo. Anyway, there was a great chanting master that they said didn't need a microphone. You could hear him for miles. Very famous in Drepung. And Rinpoche is prophesizing that Aga will be the new position for that. Rinpoche, he will become one of the greatest chanting masters to ever live at Drepung. And he thinks that that's why the Dalai Lama stopped and saw some special feature in Aga that no one could ever figure out because of Jao Rinpoche's omniscience and love and compassion. He stopped to say, I see, you're special, and just wait, because you will become this. So now he jokes with him, though. When he calls him now, he's no longer Aga. He's now, oh, the great chanting master, how are you today? So it's wonderful, wonderful karma that's being created. And we will have his family here when COVID rises and everything. We'll get some of his family members here, monks from Gold Compson, who love him, to take care of him alongside us. That's our wishes. Who knows if we can make that happen, but that's our wishes. Okay, so that's enough of that. Let's get this whole thing on the road. Thank you all for coming. Thank you all for watching. And we'll do this again for the next 20 years.